This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome from the beautiful New Hampshire seacoast here. It's a gorgeous day here today. I hope it's a beautiful day where all of you are. And Skip, you're making scary motions there. I'm not sure what that was. You're just scratching and scaring me there. But anyway, so I hope it's beautiful. All of you are. Happy spring, everyone. I see somebody's greeting us from St. Augustine, Florida, and also some from Finland. Nice to have visitors from all over, as always. So I'm Jeremy D'Entremont. A lot of you know me. I host the USLHS's podcast, Lighthearted, which you can find the episodes of the podcast at news.uslhs.org on the website, and also any smartphone podcast app. Just search for Light Space Hearted, 2 words, Lighthearted. And with me today is the Executive Director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, Jeff Gales. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, everybody.
Coming to us from the headquarters in Hansville, Washington. And of course, Skip Sherwood is our tour guide for today. I'll introduce him in just a second. So a lot of you have joined us for a lot of these tour retrospectives, so I'm not going to do a lengthy introduction or anything now, but for anybody who's new with these events and not that familiar with the USLHS, I very strongly recommend you check out the website at uslhs.org. The Society offers all kinds of things. A lot of you know the passport program and obviously the tours in this country and all over the world, and the research catalog, and just so many other things that the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers. So check out uslhs.org, also the news blog at news.uslhs.org. So today, of course, we are going to Texas. Skip Sherwood is going to be our guide. Look back at the 2012, it's 2012, right? Am I getting that right? I believe. Right. Yeah, 2012 Texas tour. And there's 5, I'm not going to say only 5 because they're a really good 5, but there are 5. Everybody make sure your mics are muted for now until we ask for questions later. Yeah, thanks. So there are 5 lighthouses in Texas. It's, of course, one of the most interesting parts of our country. It's the Gulf Coast in Texas is beautiful. I have only personally photographed one of the lighthouses in Texas, the Port Aransas or Aransas Pass Lighthouse. In 2007, my wife and I vacationed in San Antonio for a week, really loved it. One day we drove down to Corpus Christi and also went to Port Aransas and did a dolphin cruise out of there and got pretty close to that lighthouse. But I think on the tour, I think you actually got into it, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll hear about that. One of the most interesting, exciting parts of that trip for me was when we were walking through the botanical gardens in Corpus Christi, a mountain lion ran across the path in front of me. So that was kind of unexpected and exciting. And I wanted to go in the woods and take pictures of it. My wife said, please don't follow it, leave it alone. So with that, I'm going to introduce Skip Sherwood. As many of you know, a lot of you have taken tours with Skip. He and his wife, Mary Lee, have led many of the U.S. Lighthouse Society tours all over the world for a number of years now. And Skip also runs the very popular U.S. Lighthouse Society passport program. And he is coming to us from Bonnie Lake, Washington. So at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Skip.
Okay, let me see if I can.
There you go. Oh, I just want to say one more thing before you start speaking, Skip. Sure. In just a moment here, I'm going to post the map that people are seeing. I will post that in the chat for everyone. So you can download it from there if you don't already have it. The link that you got in by email had a link to the map as well. So, but I'll go ahead and post it in the chat. So you can go ahead, Skip.
Okay, those of you that have seen some of these presentations before, we used to have a list of like, well, we saw 75 lighthouses and I only have time to show you 18 or something like that. Well, no problem in this particular tour in terms of showing you all the lighthouses we saw in great detail, as a matter of fact. But when Jeff and I originally talked about doing this tour, I thought, geez, there's really not that many. And look, like some of them are kind of hard to get to, but it turns out, the 5 basic proper lighthouses that we call them, they were all built before the Civil War. Some of them survived, some had to be rebuilt. A lot of hurricanes in this area. And if you look at this map, you're not that all familiar with Florida. The entire coast of Florida in the Gulf is nothing but a chain of islands and peninsulas with a few gaps which provide the access to the major ports in cities in Texas. And this, of course, is where the lighthouses were built. Of the 5 lighthouses, there's no access to 2 of them because they're on private property. Another one's on an island that at one time you could get there by ferry, but once you got there by ferry, it was a 3-mile walk to the lighthouse. The 4th one is in actually Louisiana, and that's down a 2-track dirt road, muddy most of the time, to Sabine Pass. So it was a real challenge to try to see if we could make it to all these lighthouses. And part of the presentation day will be a little bit about the stories of how we actually got there. This gives you an idea of what we ended up having to drive. We started in San Antonio. When we set up, we're trying to figure out how could we do this in a circular manner, but damn state is so big, it's hard to do that. So we started in San Antonio, went down to Port Isabel, back up to Corpus Christi, then all the way back up the coast, all the way to Port Arthur, and then we went to Houston and flew home. So the coastline's about 400 miles, but we ended up going over 1,000 miles in this coach, which meant we spent a lot of time on that bus. We went, well, a lot of us went there early for this tour because it was in San Antonio, and if you ever go there, one of the things you always have to do is go down to the San Antonio River Walk. I'm sure many of you have been there. We enjoyed a boat tour on this particular waterway. A lot of interesting things along the way. Place is full of restaurants. We stopped at this Irish pub down here. They were having a charity pub crawl, and this was about the 4th stop for this group, so they were feeling no pain by the time they got here, and we kind of enjoyed joining with them in their efforts there. But make sure you go to the river walk. Our first stop on our tour was actually to the Alamo. I found this picture online which outlines and is a diagram of the way the Alamo originally looked. I was surprised about its size. If you look at the size of this plaza, it's like a 1.5 football fields long, and a good half football field wide. Unfortunately, most of it's gone. If you look up here and you see this little dotted line, that's pretty much all that's left of the original Alamo. And so when I get there, this is what I see. And I was telling Jeremy, it's not disappointing, but it's just kind of surprising. When you think of the Alamo, you've seen the movies, and so you assume, there's going to be all these buildings and walls, and you can see where Jim Bowie died or whatever. But it turns out it's primarily a church and a museum, and of course a gift shop, because there's always a gift shop no matter where you go. The museum is pretty interesting. Jeremy mentioned he'd been there. I found the sculptures outside pretty fascinating. This one here, which sculpted the just the idea that the Alamo fell and out of the ashes basically gave birth, well, they said to an empire state, which I'm glad. I thought that was New York, but I'm sure they're talking about, a different kind of empire. And then the relief sculptures there with probably the most famous names that were at the Alamo, Travis, Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, Bonham was one I had to look up because I couldn't remember what he did. He was the messenger they sent out that came back and let them know that there really wasn't anybody coming and they were kind of on their own. But it's really almost a reverent feeling, standing around and looking at. I mean, it's really well done in terms of these sculptures. We got there actually on March 5th, and March 6th is the anniversary of when the Alamo fell to Santa Anna's troops. So we were there one day ahead of the 176th anniversary. The picture I showed you before was not that day, because this day, the day we were there, was very, very busy. There was a band out front and everything. The picture I showed you was when we were there the day before. Otherwise I would have had to Photoshop out about 50 people. Moving down a little outside of San Antonio, we stopped at Missions National Park, which there are 4 missions, and then the Alamo, which is part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We took some time to visit the Mission San Jose, which is referred to as the Queen of the Missions. This is the largest one of the missions, built in 1720. Found it interesting that it's almost fully restored to its original design, and that was actually done during the Depression. This was one of the WPA projects during the Depression to provide work for folks, and as a result, this mission got pretty well restored during that time. The other thing, I always think of a mission. I think that they were there. The missions were built to spread Christianity, but they were really more of a community, agricultural and religious also. The main features at this particular mission is the church, as it is in all of them, really. But I found the sculpting and the facade at the front of the church, as you can see, the various figures that are sculpted here. And there is a window there, they call it the Rose Window, which was sculpted by a gentleman who was waiting for his sweetheart to arrive in Texas, and she died at sea on her way to meet him. And this is the window that he sculpted, reminding him of her, called the Rose Window. We didn't stop at the other missions. Our mission was to get to the coast, so we really spent the most time at this one mission doing that particular tour. Then we made our first Dairy Queen stop. Texas has over 600 Dairy Queens, and virtually every small town in Texas has a Dairy Queen. They told us that every youth in Texas has a Dairy Queen story. They either worked at a Dairy Queen or they hung out at a Dairy Queen. And those of you that remember Glenn Tart, he just thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. That there were 600 Dairy Queens, and he sort of figured we'd be stopping at all of them. But this was the first one in a town called Three Rivers, Texas. And there's the group of us. I see Mary and Amy, who are in the audience, are in this photo right here, along with the New Blooms and Dick Richardson and Nina Stagg. Again, a lot of ice cream eaten during this trip. As a matter of fact, they call this particular sign the Texas stop sign. is the sign for Dairy Queen. And so every time, we rode through town, everybody had to scream out, "Hey, Glenn, there's another Dairy Queen." That did get old after about the 400th one. So anyway, from there we headed further south and stopped at the King Ranch. This was amazing. This is the largest ranch in the United States. It was founded by Richard King and Gideon Lewis, who was a Texas Ranger in 1853. They call it the Running W brand, King Ranch. And the Running W, the stories behind that, it's either, rattlesnakes, which were very prevalent in this particular area, or it looks like like the horns of a Texas longhorn bull. As you can see here, we were able to see some of those longhorns. No great numbers of them, but at least we were able to get a pretty good close-up look of some of them and the size of the horns. The ranch itself is primarily in cattle, but they also do a lot of farming and sell a lot of luxury goods. If you go online and look up, King Ranch clothing or whatever, everything, a lot of leather, a lot of belts, saddles, boots, all this kind of thing. And those of you that are familiar with the Ford 150 trucks, they also make a King Ranch F-150, where you would find this particular logo. When we were at this ranch, this was dinner time, and so we went to the cowboy camp house for a cowboy dinner, and this is what that camp house looks like. We lined up in a buffet there to get our barbecue, of course, is what was the order of the day. There's our friend Dareth showing off her plate of barbecue, and we had smoked brisket, sausage, ranch beans, potato salad, cookies, whatever else to drink here. But this was a lot of fun because it wasn't the typical meal, but was very good. So we were were able to find out this is really meals that they would serve and still do serve to the cowhands at this particular ranch. Now we're going to get to lighthouses. This gives you some idea of where those lighthouses and why they were built, where they were built. Three of the busiest ports in Texas are Corpus Christi, Houston, and the top one up here is at Beaumont. And Beaumont's mostly for oil. But the Houston is actually the second busiest port in the United States. Beaumont's number 5 and Corpus Christi's number 6. So 3 of the top busiest ports in the United States are actually in Texas. And you can begin to see with where all these islands and peninsulas are, there's not many ways to get into the mainland, but it's where you got through these particular gaps that these cities developed and these ports actually developed. Today, the major ports include these others at Port Arthur, Texas City and Galveston, Port Lavaca, Port Comfort, and Brownsville. And I throw this one in because Indianola, at the time of the building, for example, of the Lighthouse of Matagorda Island, was the second busiest port in Texas. It was destroyed once by hurricane, rebuilt, and then destroyed again and never rebuilt. But it was very instrumental in trying to get the lighthouse built on Matagorda Island. So we're going to start down here at the bottom at what is called the Brazos-Santiago Pass, which is the pass between South Padre Island and the Brazos Island, which gets you into Port Isabel, and eventually to Brownsville. A little closer look at, this is what it looks like. The pass is right up here, and the Rio Grande is down here, and they built the first lighthouse here at Port Isabel in 1857 on the top of a hill overlooking this harbor right here. And that's why this particular spot was chosen, which gave it a relatively high focal plane. During the Civil War, they deactivated it, took the lens out, and the Confederates tried to blow it up twice, but somehow it managed to survive. And in 1888, they rebuilt it, but in 1888 they had to build this screw pile lighthouse out here because, as it turned out, the land that the lighthouse at Port Isabel was built on did not belong to the government. And of course, some guy figured this out eventually and then demanded a ransom. And as it turned out, the government didn't pay, so they built this screw pile lighthouse out here right at the entrance. But eventually, they did pay for the land, and the lighthouse at Port Isabel was in fact reactivated. The light over here at the Brazos Santiago Pass Lighthouse, or just called the Brazos Santiago Light, it was operational until 1940 when a painting crew accidentally set it on fire and just totally destroyed the whole thing. You know, most of these things were just wooden structures, and so once a fire got started there, that was the end of it. But they did manage to save the lens, and the lens was moved and put at the top of the Coast Guard station on Padre Island. We actually drove across the bridge here at this point right here to see the Coast Guard station where that lens was moved to. It's no longer there, but that's kind of the story of the way that all worked. This is the way the lighthouse looks today, well, actually in 2012. And it was interesting, it sits on this little mound here, but in fact, this used to be a hill. But when the city started growing up around it, they started cutting away at the hill, but they left the lighthouse at the top of this little mound, and of course built these set of steps that go up to it. We were able to climb this lighthouse at 77 steps. In 2000, they built a replica of the keeper's house, which now is the home of the Port Isabel Chamber of Commerce. Here's our old friend Glenn, who was at the top of the lighthouse. I used this to show you, the view you get from the top of the lighthouse out across the bay and that highway that goes out to South Padre Island. When you're out there, it kind of looking back, this is what you can see. We actually had lunch at this little restaurant right here. And here's a sign you won't see very much. Watch for pelicans when flashing. Now, that's not exactly something that I'd ever seen before. And I'm not sure whether they come in a flock and somebody's there to, turn on the light, or they trigger something that sets off this light so that I guess they don't come crashing into your car. You get a bird hits a car, that's one thing, but a pelican's a pretty reasonably sized bird, and that could do some real damage. But that's one that I had not seen and had not seen since. Today, this is the only lighthouse that's open to the public and that you can climb, at least the public. But we are not the public because we are the United States Lighthouse Society, so we open extra doors. All right, once we left Port Isabel, went up the coast to Corpus Christi, and this is the next gap you see in these peninsula islands, which occurs here at what is called Aransas Pass. Now, a little closer look at this. Port Aransas sits here. Aransas Pass is actually on the mainland. It's connected to this is actually a peninsula down here, because when we drove from Corpus Christi, we actually came up this peninsula because it was quicker than going around. And of course, if you come across here, you end up having to take a ferry across this little opening right here. because the ships still come through this pass and on to Corpus Christi. The lighthouse itself is built on Harbor Island, which is right here on what is called the Lydia Ann Channel. And sometimes this lighthouse is referred to as the Lydia Ann Lighthouse, named after the daughter of one of the keepers of this lighthouse before it turned private. The interesting thing that happens here, if you look here, you say, okay, the lighthouse is here. Then why is it here and not down here? Well, the truth of the matter is when they built the lighthouse, the gap was here. And in fact, the ships went through here and then down like this. Over time, that shifted to the point where the gap, this is actually about a mile from the lighthouse itself now. So obviously, the lighthouse at some point was no longer of any value. And eventually in 1952, they put a light at the Coast Guard station in Port Aransas, which now acts as the light itself. Of course, this lighthouse here is now in private hands. Now, this was a real interesting one to try to get to because, first of all, the land and the lighthouse is owned by Charles Butt, who is the CEO or the owner of the H-E-B grocery chain in Texas, which is a $31 billion revenue business. And because he was the owner, we figured, well, we needed to contact him. Well, I tried to contact him. We ended up, of course, with an assistant who helped us out, who put us in contact with the person who was the previous keeper out there, a man by the name of Rick Pratt, who put us in contact with Rick Reichenbach, who was the current keeper out there. And they said, well, we'll see what we can do. And they did gain us access to the island. But the problem is we had to get there. And the dolphin tour boats, like the one Jeremy was talking about, they don't go into that little channel that's in front of the lighthouse. They do go by it so that you can get a good photo of it and everything, but they don't land there. And this particular vessel here does do dolphin tours. And so we had to see whether or not we could get them to land out there. And when in just a second, you'll see that, perhaps why that was a problem. So we met Billy Gaskins, who owns this boat and the dolphin tour. And incidentally, he became the next lighthouse keeper out at Aransas. Now, this is what it looks like when you're coming in. And looking over here on the left, you can see a small boat over there. That was where the boat had to dock. And there was just not that much of a dock for the size of that boat. And we had to really, they had said, yes, we can get there, but we're not 100% sure. So we all got on board, and when we finally got out there, they managed to, fit into that little cove there, and next to that dock, so that we could actually land and walk up to this lighthouse. The lighthouse itself, as you can see, it's an octagonal lighthouse made out of brick. It's one of these ones that has the well, let me back up there. It's got a screen around the top. You see this at a number of lighthouses, particularly down in the south. It keeps the birds from flying and crashing into the lantern room because they're sometimes attracted, to the light. The keepers' houses here are all up on pilings for obvious reasons, because the hurricanes down here and the surges, the tide surges often, will come in and, just basically go up about this high at these keepers' houses. When Charles Butt bought this in 1973, it wasn't until 1989 that it was actually relit as a private aid to navigation. And that's when these keepers came in and started working to, restore it. This on the right is Rick Pratt, Rick Reichenbach on the left. Mr. Pratt on the right was quite a character and very, very helpful and welcoming to us here. The other thing, you know, when the guy that you get to let you in owns a grocery chain, you sometimes get a few goodies. And these guys must not have thought we'd eaten in a week, because they brought out all this food, and it was like, I don't know, maybe like 10:30 in the morning or something like that. A lot more than we expected, but we were really, you know, appreciative of what the owner of the grocery chain did for us here. We were able to climb this lighthouse, which I'm sure not that many people have been able to do because of the hoops you have to jump through. I see Judy Newbloom up there. Looks like Glenn and Dick Richardson. You can see that fencing around the top of it. When we went to go to Texas, and as Jeremy said, one of my jobs is with as a volunteer for the passport stamp program. There was the only stamp that existed was the one in Port Isabel. So we made stamps for all the places we were going to stop, and then we're going to leave them at some point when we went to each of these lighthouses, leave them wherever we could find somebody that would keep it, and then, you know, stamp it for passport books when people were able to get there. So it actually ended up at the Port Aransas Museum, and that's also where this lens from the Aransas Lighthouse is also housed now. So this was quite a day. We were very excited to get out here. The fact that we were actually able to get on the island, get to climb it, and we got fed on top of all of that. The next stop up the coast is the Texas Maritime Museum, which actually has a lighthouse. It's a private aid to navigation. It was built in 2003. It's not what Jeremy and I would call a proper lighthouse, but it is a private aid. You can see the light is in this little lantern up here, if you will. I mean, this is more like this widow's walk around the outside or the gallery. On the inside, it's just, you know, a big room with a few exhibits and things like that. And here's a closer look at it here. And what you can see from up there, you get a good view. This is actually in the city of Rockport, and you get a nice view of the port, and of course, the light services as a guide to folks coming in their vessels into this particular port. We thought, seeing how it was a recognized lighthouse, we did have a stamp made for it, and if you go there, you can get this particular stamp for this lighthouse, if you will. All right, further up the coast, we come to the gap that's between Matagorda Island this is called the Matagorda Peninsula and the Matagorda Island. And this is the one that leads into what is now Port Lavaca, Point Comfort. But at that time, it led primarily to the city of Indianola. And as I mentioned before, at this time, Indianola was the second busiest the second busiest port in the state. The first lighthouse they built here to guide ships through this particular gap was in 1852 and it was an iron plate lighthouse with a third order lens. The Confederates, as they did for most of these lighthouses when they were withdrawing from them, tried to destroy it, but they failed in destroying it. And after the war, it was moved to a higher place and painted black with a new lens, and 14 feet were added. Now, if you've seen this lighthouse, that explains why. This is the lighthouse here, and you can see, that it just goes straight up. Because they added this additional 14 feet, it gives us this particular shape, which again is a little bit unusual. but they did use the bottom of the original lighthouse for the one that they added in 1873. The hurricanes that hit here in the late 1800s, two of them, one pretty much destroyed the town of Indianola, killing hundreds of people. But the lighthouse did in fact survive, both of those hurricanes. In the mid, actually this light was deactivated in 1995, but in 1999, the Matagorda Island Foundation, I think it's called, worked on restoring and actually had it relit, and it was lit on the millennium. So it was lit at midnight, first day of 2000, of the year 2000. What happened in 1962, 1966, they built a ship canal. Right, well, the canal was already there. There was an opening there, but they dredged it out. They built these jetties, and at that particular point, at that particular point, there was really no need for this lighthouse anymore, which of course is down here. So that kind of explains how the lighthouse developed here, why it was built here, the shape of it. Now, in order to get to this lighthouse, you have to go to Port O'Connor and somehow take a boat out to, there's a little landing out here for a boat, and then hike 3 miles to the lighthouse. Well, we didn't have a boat and I didn't want to walk 3 miles. So we decided we called the city down here and found some fishermen that were willing to take us out in their boats, but they could only take like 5 or 6 people at a time. And this is what one of those boats looks like. And as you can see here, there was only 5 people on this particular boat, but we had 3 boats that made 2 trips to take us out here. Those of you that remember Joe Van Schaik, one of my favorite people, sitting in the back of this boat, and if you kind of look and you can kind of see the front end is pretty high up, and he's almost sitting in the water back there, but these things moved pretty fast. And of course, to be able to ferry us out there, go back and ferry another group out, ferry the first group back, come back and ferry the other one back, they had to be able to move pretty swiftly. And here's Norm Bossi. Norm doesn't have a lot of hair, but you can see what his hair looked like here when he was sitting in that seat, in front of the driver of these particular boats. And so this was quite a ride to get out here. When I had called these guys the night before, they said, there's no way we're going to be able to go because of the weather. And so we thought, oh, well, crap, but we're going to go down there anyway. And when we got there, they said, well, if we can get it done pretty quick, we can probably beat the weather. And turns out we were able to. When you get to the island, there was a dock there that you could dock at. This is our friend Al King, and we were warned about the mosquitoes on Matagorda Island. And so Al came prepared. He wasn't about to get bit when he got on that island. Now remember, once you get here, you got to walk 3 miles. Well, it wasn't up for that either. So through the Texas Wildlife and State Parks, I was managed to find the man who was kind of in charge of working on this island, and we arranged for him to meet us at this particular point here. They had a truck and a trailer, and so we were able to climb on this trailer and take us out to the lighthouse. So it was a real logistical accomplishment to be able to get us all out there, and the fact that the weather held for us was even a bigger miracle. Now, otherwise, you can see this lighthouse. I suspect if you find a boat that comes out of Port O'Connor or somewhere else, and or even out of Port Lavaca, and can kind of come down here and pass out here. But of course, we were able to get there. When we here's what the lighthouse looks like in 2012. It's in pretty bad shape, but it does, you know, the iron plating does get that rust. Here we are in our photo line up here. And of course, you know, Lighthouse Society people are always looking for some way to get inside. Before I get to that, here's the stamp we made for this one. And this was also one of the postage stamps that series they did for the Gulf Coast lighthouses. This was one of the stamps, and there was one other that was on the tour we'll get to later. So we found this little window right here, and if you stuck your head in there and held your camera just right, this is what you were able to see. So you could actually see the stairs up inside the lighthouse and through that little opening. The lens from this lighthouse is at a museum in Port Lavaca, which is where we took the stamp, and now the stamp is available there if you go to that museum and view this third order lens in Port Lavaca. Back to this same map here, in 1858, shortly after they built the Matagorda Lighthouse, they built a screw pile lighthouse in the bay here at a shallow reef area referred to as the Half Moon Reef Lighthouse. It survived both of the hurricanes, but eventually it was deactivated, but it was reactivated when Port Lavaca became a more important port in the early 1900s. In the early 1940s, it was sold to a private, party who put the thing on a barge and took it to Port Lavaca, where it actually is today. I mean, what they did with it initially, they actually used it as a building, as an office for a business, but then they turned it over and gave it to Calhoun County, who transported it to a point which is right on Highway Texas 35. And interestingly enough, the restoration of it was performed by an Eagle Scout project. So it's kind of interesting. Obviously, the screw piles are gone and everything, but pretty much intact as far as the rest of it. And this was the stamp that we left at there's a visitor center that's right next to this particular lighthouse. And now it's a Texas historical marker. Going up the coast a little further, most of these lighthouses that were built to guide ships through these gaps. This one at the mouth of the Brazos River was actually used as a coastal light for ships going along this coast. It's actually a twin of the lighthouse at Sanibel Island, for those of you that are familiar with that one. It was dismantled in 1967, but we, of course, couldn't pass up the fact that we could see the lantern room from it, which is here. And part of the lens from that particular lighthouse, which was in a museum called the Brazoria County Historical Museum. So even though we didn't get to see the lighthouse, which is obviously gone, we did get to see some of the pieces of it that were left. Excuse me, my voice is starting to crack. All right, now we're up to the major gap up here that goes into the city of Houston, Galveston, and Texas City. These are the Galveston Bay lighthouses. We'll talk about each of these quickly. But what you have here today, again, these are three major ports, the one at Galveston, Texas City, Houston. the Houston Ship Canal, which was built in 1914, is the way these major, large ships actually get into Houston. The first, well, not the first one, but I'm throwing this in here because of the way we did this. In 1854, they built this called Half Moon Lighthouse. Again, it's a second half moon one. It was on a shoal over here, and that lighthouse was destroyed in a hurricane, but they built a replica of it and actually there's a dike that goes along this little area right here, and there's a road along that dike, and you can drive along that road and stop. And as you can probably see there, it was the Rotary Club of Texas City that, partially funded the building of that particular replica. I remember this because when we got to the entrance to this dike with our bus, they wouldn't let us go on it. And they said, well, it's a $5 charge. And we couldn't, $5 for what? And well, anyway, coach driver didn't have any money. I remember paying the $5 for this so we could get out on this dike, So not sure, what the money, I think we just got held up. I'm surprised they didn't ask us for 50. All right, before we get to the major ones on here, there were two lights up here that were kind of interesting, and we chose to go up and see them. Clear Lake is the lake up here that's across from the Johnson Space Center in this particular area. And in this city right here, Kemah, this was their water tower for years. It finally totally crapped out. And at this particular time, the city council decided that they wanted to build a dual purpose structure that would be a water tower and a lighthouse. And so this is what they built. This is a 300,000 gallon, 144 foot tall water tower. And at the top of it, they put a lantern room, and they wanted to put a real Fresnel lens in it, until they found out that a real Fresnel lens was going to cost about $750,000. And the city, of course, was not too big on that. And so they hired, oh God, what's his name? What's his name, Jeff?
Dan Spinella.
Oh, Don Spinella.
Dan.
From Florida, who builds these Fresnel lenses today out of acrylic and brass, and paid about 1/10 of what a real one had cost. And the interesting thing here is then, okay, this thing is filled with water. The only way to get up it is to climb up the side of it in this caged in ladder area. And now you got this lens, which is the size of an actual third order lens. You got to get up here. So seeing how you have things today you didn't have back then, you just get a crane and you have them haul the lens to the top. And it was really interesting because they said they had to really, figure out all this in advance, because they had to take out a window in the lantern room in order to be able to fit the lens through that particular gap. And now if you go by, we don't, I remember this primarily, it was pouring rain. You can see how wet the streets here is here. And somehow we were hiding in doorways to try to get this particular photo. But there is a 300,000 gallon water tank lighthouse, which, I thought was kind of interesting. And then over on Clear Lake, there's a development over here and a harbor at what is called South Shore Harbor and a marina. When we were there, this development hadn't even, the infrastructure was there. There were roads, but there were no houses, and it was gated. And we had to deal with somebody down the road at that marina who had a key to that gate. And every day before that, I kept calling, yeah, I'll be there, I'll be there. And when I went to call him when we were almost there, I couldn't get a hold of it. But when we got there, the gate was open, so the guy had done his work for me, and we walked out to this particular, full lighthouse, if you will. But the thing I found out interesting about this is it's across from the Johnson Space Center, and if you are familiar with this lighthouse, it was designed to look like that lighthouse. And Alan Shepard was the one who said, I want it to look like the one at Cape Canaveral. And this, of course, is the lighthouse at Cape Canaveral. And so, I mean, obviously it's got a different number of bands or whatever, but if you look at it quickly, it is pretty much a copy of that particular lighthouse. So that made this one kind of interesting, along with the water tower. Okay, let's go back now to the Galveston area here. One of the things that over the years they did here is they built jetties in this particular area, because for years they had to unload ships, put them on lighter barges or whatever, and move them into like Houston, Texas City. Eventually they dug out this channel, they put in the jetties, and these jetties are 3-4 miles long, and it just pushed all the flow out of the bay, sort of made it a natural channel. And then this is what's dredged on a regular basis. Okay, let me see, where am I here? In 1918, it was interesting, they built the jetties in 1874, but they didn't put a light on the jetty until 1918. And when they put the jetty on the light, they extended the jetty another mile after they put the light on it. This is the lighthouse here, standing on this somewhat looking scaffolding. The lighthouse itself, the keepers lived there at 3 floors, as you can see. But unfortunately, in the year 2000, a storm toppled this lighthouse and it fell into the bay. But before it was totally washed away, they salvaged the lantern room, and the lantern room was turned into this, which is now the front door of Galveston College. And their vision is this, a beacon light guiding lifelong learning. And this sculpture, that this is the actual lantern from that given, from this lighthouse. This, of course, was all added to it. The other lighthouse built here at Bolivar Point, I always call it Point Bolivar or Fort Bolivar, but it appears that Bolivar Point is the appropriate name for it. It was built in 1852. It was raised in 1858. But interestingly enough, during the Civil War, they tore it down and used, it was an iron lighthouse. They tore it down and used the iron plating on their ships and to make other military armaments. And the lighthouse you see right here is the one that was built in 1872 after the war, and a 90-foot tower, third order lens with the black and white stripes, which it, of course, no longer has. There was a hurricane in Galveston in 1900 that pretty much destroyed that city. 6,000 people died, and 120 people rode out the hurricane inside this lighthouse. A lot of you may have heard these stories. The lightkeeper there, a gentleman by the name of Harry Claiborne, and his wife fed these 120 people who sat on the stairs and rode out the hurricane until the food was all gone. And 100 years later, the Coast Guard actually named a buoy tender after him, the Harry Claiborne, and that is now stationed actually in Galveston. In 1915, another storm, same kind of thing happened, and at that hurricane, it destroyed most of the buildings, which were, when they were rebuilt, they were look more like this, because this is what it looks like today. And you can see when they rebuilt these keepers' homes, they stood them on these iron pilings, again, to avoid the storm surge when it came through. Uh, the interesting thing we ran into here, this is a picture that you can get from across the road looking on, across a small pond to this lighthouse. There, however, is a road that leads into the lighthouse, but that's private property. And I tried for weeks to find out who owned it and how to get a hold of them and try to see if we could get access to it. And I left town thinking, wow, this is as good as it's going to get. But leave it to Jeff Gales, who, he is our Sherlock Holmes. I'm not sure. He called, the local police department. He called everybody. He found out the name of the person who owns it. Actually knew that. It was to try to find out, how do we get a hold of this guy? And the night before we went here, Jeff called me. He says, I got a hold of him. You need to call him and see if he can come over and let you on his property. Well, the next morning I called and he wasn't there. I called him again when we were leaving lunch to get on the ferry to come across to this, and he answered. He said, sure, just come on the property. I'll meet you there. And of course, we had told nobody that we were going to do this. And so we stopped, took our photos, and then, everybody, wow, this is really cool. Too bad we can't get on it. And I told the bus driver, I made it loud. And I said, well, go down that road over there, and maybe we can get a different angle or view. And so we went down that road, and then I looked in, and this Mike Maxwell's truck was sitting over by one of the keepers' houses. And I said, well, hell, there's a truck down there. I said, why don't we just go down there and see if they'll open the door? And I remember Al King yelling, no way. And I said, yeah, just go ahead. And so he starts down this 2-track. Finally, I had to tell him about, actually, we made arrangements, and everybody was pretty excited now that we were actually able to get on the property and get closer views of this lighthouse. We were not able to climb it. We did get inside. He opened the front door for us, and we were able to look inside and look up the tower. This is another photo pretty much of one of the keepers' houses. Here's the other keeper's house. Again, as you can see on these pilings, I'm assuming these are cisterns that they put here, for water gathered off the roof. And again, this was one of our stamps. And this is Mike Maxwell. He and another individual, part of that same family, are the owners of the property. And they were telling us at that time, their plans to try to get fully renovate this lighthouse. And they set up a foundation in 2018. They figured they needed about $3.5 million to do the renovations. I don't think anything's been done. He did tell us at that time that the first priority was the lantern room and to replace that. And again, he was very, very cordial, glad to see us. We were, something that we hadn't planned on. And again, my hat's off to Jeff for shaking this one out of the trees for us. Then we finally ended up at the last pass up here at Sabine Pass, which it actually goes into the Sabine River and to Port Arthur and on up to Beaumont. Here's a closer look at it and the way the lighthouses are set there. You can see that the Texas-Louisiana border is through Sabine Lake, and the river in this part of it right here forms that particular boundary. This lighthouse is fairly well known because of the buttresses that they put at the bottom to spread the weight of this particular lighthouse. It's octagonal, but they were afraid that that the weight of the lighthouse, because this is a very marshy, soft ground area, you know, would not hold if they put the entire weight of the lighthouse, you know, on the, and they drove pilings into the ground, put the lighthouse on that, and then the buttresses on that. They built jetties again out here and put a light out here eventually, which eventually made the need for this particular light, it was no longer needed. And out about 15 miles, I believe it is there is a bank out there called the Sabine Bank, and they put a caisson lighthouse out here in 1906. Of course, this is long gone. It's still there. I mean, the base of the caisson, but the structure on top is gone, and it now has a what do you call it? A skeletal tower with a light on it, so it's still active. But they did take the lantern room and put it in a park that's actually across from this lighthouse. So we were able to go and at least see that part of that particular lighthouse. This is what the lighthouse in 1932 looked like. I mean, it really does look like a rocket ship here. And you know, with the black and white stripes. But today it looks like the one on the left. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot that would have to be done to renovate this particular light. Again, it has a lot of work that needs to be done on the brick. The lantern room is basically gone, as you can see from over here. That lantern room isn't to be found anywhere. I mean, that just deteriorated, the glass out, the top came off. This is a better photo of it and kind of gives you the idea of, you know, it kind of sits in the middle of this marshland, which is going to make it even more difficult to work or renovate it. Although the Cameron Preserve Alliance was founded in the early 2000s, and of course their idea was to try to raise the money to restore this particular lighthouse, but this is going to take many millions of dollars. And I know in recent years, some of the storms that have hit the Louisiana coast have made it virtually impossible almost to get down to this particular lighthouse. There is a road that goes down there. It's owned by Cheniere Energy, which has a plant nearby. And without permission, you can't, you know, drive down there. We were able to get the folks from that alliance to help us out, because again, we would have had to walk 2 miles in the mud. Instead, we rode in their vehicles 2 miles in the mud. It was really funny. The gal that I rode with, it was a brand new Lexus, and she had just had it detailed. And we climbed in this thing and we went down, and it was very muddy. And when it came time to get back in the thing, I thought, oh my, you know, I really should walk back. Because they said, oh no, just go ahead, get in, we'll get it cleaned again. But again, it took a number of vehicles to get us all down there. And as you can see, pretty muddy in the process. Here's a picture of our hardy souls with that lighthouse in the background. The stamp that we had for it is actually at the Cameron Parish Library, which has been closed, of course, during COVID, and so that stamp has been pretty much non-accessible. And this is the other postage stamp that they made of the Gulf Coast lighthouses of the one at Sabine Pass. Our last stop on the trip was at the Museum of the Gulf Coast in Port Arthur, where they had the lens for the Sabine Pass Lighthouse. And I want to tell you that if you're ever down in Port Arthur, just passing through, stop at this museum. They had more stuff in here than, I mean, you look at it from the outside, you go, oh, geez, this is not going to be very much. But they had all kinds of areas that were devoted to different things. One of them was to music. And because of people like the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly and some other ones that came out of that particular area of Texas, there was a lot dealing with them. And then there was this, Janis Joplin's Porsche. You know, now there's something you don't see every day. I think this was a replica. I don't think this is the original one, but you know, a lot of people found this, you know, very interesting. But a lot of things in this museum that make it worth that particular stop. We stopped there just to see the lens, and it was like, okay, this is a 15-minute stop because you want to go in and get a picture of the lens. We ended up spending an hour and a half in here, and actually, as a result, we canceled we were going to do a boat ride up the Houston Ship Canal, and we canceled that because and the other thing they had was a gift shop. Now, if you look where all those lighthouses were, like at Aransas Pass or Matagorda or you know, at Bolivar Point and all that, there were no gift shops. And of course, our group, when there's only 5 lighthouses and no gift shops, you know, they were starved. And so spent beaucoup bucks at this particular point. Well, just a few odd shots of people taking photos. And, you know, our guys, you know, they're always trying to get a new angle. It's like trying to get a picture of inside that one lighthouse. These guys are laying on the ground trying to, you know, get the special angle of this, not sure why. First place we had breakfast, they had the waffles and the shake of Texas. Now, there's something you don't see every day. I think I ate part of this one before I decided to take a picture or something. Here's Ken and Diane. One of the last nights we spent at a seafood buffet where they had swamp pop music. And these two were really cutting the rug. And everybody kind of got up there and had a big old time at this particular, trying to remember the camp. Oh, Larry's it was called, I remember. Food was great. Had some issues with some of the meals, but Ken and Diane didn't mind. They just had a big old time. Bob and Bill, you know, after one of the stops at Dairy Queen, of course. This is me inside this outfit here at that, remember the Pirates Cove or whatever it was called way back in Port Isabel. You could stick your head in here. Of course, I almost got my head caught in it. There's our mascot Bosley, you know, at the King Ranch riding his horse. And I got to tell you this story. This was hilarious. We showed you the lantern room from Sabine Pass, and we took our photos. We got on the bus. We started to drive away, and all of a sudden somebody says, "Look, there's another lighthouse." And so, you know, the driver stops. We all pile out. This is a church, and it's a church. This looks like a little lighthouse with a bell in. And this shows you how starved we were for lighthouses on this trip. That you know that we would stop for this, but then the minister or priest or whoever it was comes walking out, and here's 30 people taking not pictures of his church, but of this little stone lighthouse. And he thought it was just hilarious, you know, that we would bother to stop, and we struck up quite a conversation with him. But I always point this out and this is the last lighthouse we saw on the tour. And, you know, given the fact that there were so few lighthouses, this in fact was, you know, a special stop. So anyway, and that's Texas. I've done quite a few of these lighthouse tours, and I tell you, I never had more interesting logistics than I did on this to see just 5 lighthouses. Usually with that much logistics, I can see 35 lighthouses. But I know that the society's going there in October, I think, in connection with a trip to the Yucatan, and they'll be able to see them all, but I don't think they're going to be able to get into them the way we were. And I don't think that getting on some of those islands or whatever was a real challenge, but those of us that made it, it was certainly worth it. That's it.
Huh.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Skip. That was Very interesting as always. You always do a great job with these. And, you know, maybe it was only 5 proper lighthouses, but there was you crammed a lot of cultural activities into that trip. It looks like it was a really fun trip.
Yeah, and I think I look back at my journal and I'd have to ask, somebody was with us. I don't know if Ken and Diane can tell you how many Dairy Queens we actually did stop at.
Yeah.
But I mean, it had to be 4 or 5, and for sure. And that coach driver, I don't know if you guys remember the coach driver, but he just thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread that we got to stop at all these Dairy Queens. But he kept complaining at the end that he had gained, like 15 pounds because we stopped at all these Dairy Queens.
So we can open it up for questions, and there's 2 ways you can ask questions. One is in the chat. You just want to type a question for Skip or for me or Jeff into the chat. You can do that. I don't know if we have any. I haven't been watching constantly. I don't think we have any questions in there yet. But also, if you want to digitally raise your hand to ask a question, then you can unmute yourself. But click on participants in your controls, and you should see in the window that comes up, you should see the option to raise hand. That means digitally raise your hand, and that'll move you to the top of the list, and we'll call on you. You can actually speak your question out loud.
Let me ask, hey, Diane, what do you remember about that trip?
About the Dairy Queens?
No, the whole trip.
Oh, well, it was a long bus ride, but it was fun. We did have a good time. I have to tell you, but I think yeah, the bus rides were long, but yeah, and the surprises like the Aransas Pass and I mean that was incredible.
I know we do one of these tours you do tours in New England, you maybe drive the bus 250 miles and you see, tons of lighthouses. Well, we went 1,000 miles and saw 5. So and it was a lot of time on the bus. That's what the Dairy Queens were for.
Well, and the Dairy Queens, you use them for
pressure stops.
Yeah, we were trying to think what word you used. Yes. Yeah, that's what it was. That and the Dairy Queen. So then you had to stop at the next one.
That's true.
Yeah.
There weren't enough Walmarts,
If you remember, Skip, this tour came out of our goal to try to bring society members to a region of the US that we'd never traveled to before. And so that's how we ended up with 1,000 miles with only 5 lighthouses. We'd never been to the Texas Gulf Coast before.
That's true. We even had dinner with them, I think, in San Antonio, a couple of those people.
So Corla asks, what was your most favorite lighthouse out of the 5 you saw? That's always a hard question to answer, I'm sure. But Skip, I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Well, I just think the one at Aransas Pass was, we got the climate, the setting. Of course, it was a lot of food too, so that helped.
Yeah.
So I mean, they all were interesting in their own way. But if I had, that was my favorite because of the 3 guys that that we had, in more than that we had to deal with. The fact that we got there made it the most interesting.
Mm-hmm. My notice, I put it up as my background. I had trouble finding my pictures from that trip, but I did find them. Yeah, that's the view I had from the Dolphin cruise.
Yeah, you do get a really nice view from that. So I mean, it's not like you're going to miss.
Right. It was a lot of fun. We really had a lot of dolphins following us the whole time, diving and swimming in the wake of the boat. It was really neat. And zillions of white pelicans, as far as the eye could see. They're all over the place there.
That's when you need one of them signs. Watch for pelicans.
Yeah. Question: were the blue this is hard to say. Were the blue bonnets blooming?
I don't remember them. I don't. Man, Ken and Diane are shaking their heads. So, I mean, we were on that bus. I think we were sleeping most of the time.
Right. Well, if there are any blue bonnets, say blue bonnets blooming 3 times fast.
Blue bonnets blooming. Yeah. Okay.
Good job. If there were any, you missed them, but
Well, I must have done a great job.
yeah, you answered everybody's questions
what I-
before they could ask them. Yeah.
When I
You
was,
know, this tour really emphasizes how big Texas is.
Yeah.
It's a huge state. It could be a country.
It was a Texas-sized tour. So when is that next tour that goes to Texas and part of Mexico, Jeff?
Ron, Jeff.
Sorry, I can look it up. It's on our website. So go click
Yeah.
on USLHS.org, click on tours.
I thought it was in the
And,
fall sometime.
It's
Yeah,
this fall.
and
This
then
fall.
they're going to be going through the Gulf Coast of Texas and then from San Antonio doing a flight during the tour to the Yucatan. And you'll see some of the lighthouses in the Yucatan, some pyramids, some cultural pyramids and things, whatever. So it's going to be a great trip. It's in November, actually.
Oh, okay.
November, yeah.
Well,
That's after the hurricanes, huh?
Yeah,
After-
right.
Yeah, no, the weather will be great. I mean, going to the Southern Hemisphere and our winter is their summer. So this is a good time to go.
mm-hmm. I'll be leading a Maine tour October 1st to 7th. Looking forward to that. Probably see some of the people here on.
Uh-oh. What happened to Bear? What happened to Jeremy? You muted yourself.
I didn't do anything. That is really bizarre. I don't know. I was talking for a long time there. I guess you couldn't hear me.
It was my fault. I accidentally muted you, Jeremy, instead of myself.
I knew I didn't do anything.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jeff. Good co-host. Good. What is it? Yeah. Good. Thanks for that.
All right.
So I have a question for you, Jeff. Al King asks, how was the attendance for the South Carolina, Georgia tour?
It was actually sold out with a waiting list, believe it or not. It's the very first tour we operated, as COVID restrictions were loosening up, and it actually was a great trip. People had a lot of fun. So we're anticipating the domestic tours we're offering this year to be equally as good. And as long as everybody can, get to the point of origin, they'll have a great time because the restrictions all over the country are slowly but surely loosening a little bit.
Right. Our friend, is it pronounced Jussi, Jussi in Finland? Or I'm not sure of the pronunciation, but
Yes.
there you are.
yes,
There you
yes,
are.
correct, yeah.
You see? Okay. I don't know if you want to, since you've unmuted yourself, you can go ahead and ask what you were trying to ask there.
Yeah, I was just curious about this Newfoundland Labrador tour next year, August, September. I would be very happy to get a more precise itinerary and schedule of that. And so I guess it will come soon, I hope.
Newfoundland and Labrador tour, August,
Yeah.
September next year.
Yeah, you see, we'll go ahead and send you more details on the itinerary. I'll make a note and Jerry will send you the information by email.
When about this summer or later in the spring, fall, or I'm just curious because I would like to make my calendar to work, so I'm be curious to know
It's the Canada tour.
more details.
So yeah, so you're talking about Newfoundland, right?
Yeah, I was checking the next year tours. I think that might be also interesting.
Yeah, we had to
connected to something
postpone
else.
it till 2022 because Canada has basically closed the borders. They announced for another year, so we had to push
okay.
it to 2022. And I'm looking it up right now.
August to September.
Yeah, so it's basically the end of August to the beginning of September 2022.
Yes. So
Yeah.
how about this Australia tour? Is it also now changing, or is it
Yeah,
still a bit
Australia, we
so-so?
had, yeah, Australia, we were hoping not to, but it looks like we're postponing that till 2022 also, because again, just like Canada, they're not opening up their border. So they're not opening up, only essential business, not, tourists aren't essential apparently at this moment.
Right.
Well, but lighthouses are quite essential, aren't they?
I
Of
agree.
course.
I agree.
Okay, yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Speaking of Newfoundland, I just interviewed the woman who's the site manager for Cape Bonavista Lighthouse in Newfoundland. That'll be on the podcast on June 20th. That was really interesting. And we have a question, Kimberly, question to Skip. Is there any update on the renovations on the privately, I guess, owned lighthouse on the Texas tour? Is that, which one are we talking about? Point Bolivar? Do you hear that question, Skip? We can't hear you. I think you might be muted. Skip?
I tried to find information about, whether they had made any progress with raising that money for Bolivar Point,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't find it. And I don't think that the one at Matagorda Island has gone very far either.
Yeah.
So, and I know that the one at Sabine Pass, of course, is Louisiana, but they've had all kinds of problems simply because the bad weather and COVID and everything else pretty much put a lot of that on hold now.
Yeah, I actually tried to contact somebody for the podcast about Matagorda, and I was I think it was more than a year ago. I was told nothing is happening, basically.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so please ask questions if you have any. It was a lot of nice comments for the tour, Skip.
Thank you.
As per always. So good seeing everyone. Thanks, Skip. Wish we had gone on the tour. Tony and Alma. Hi. Jeff, did you want to add anything before?
No, that's great. Thanks, Skip, for doing it. It was fun working on this trip with you and had a lot of last minute successes. And it just goes to show you the saying, never give up, never surrender. That's our motto at the U.S. Lighthouse Society.
I could actually do a whole presentation on having to wait till the last minute for you to pull something off. I mean, remember the one that got us out in the Birdfoot Delta and to see those ones in the Mississippi Delta? You were still negotiating with the guy. Darlene will remember that, because when we got on the boat, they said, you can't sit out on the deck. She absolutely refused to go below. And but anyway, it's been more than once that you had me hanging until the last minute. But you've always come through.
Yeah.
All right, I'm out of here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Skip. It was great.
Folks.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Happy summer, early summer here. And this will be posted on, again, on the U.S. Lighthouse Society YouTube page and the U.S. Lighthouse Society website within a couple of days. Can't say exactly when, within a couple of days.
Right. And we'll announce the next tour retrospective as soon as possible. We haven't planned it yet, but we'll announce what it is and get it out to you early.
Yep.
So long, everybody.
So long, there's also a special event related to the Titanic Memorial Lighthouse coming up pretty soon too. So watch for notices about that too.
Perfect.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Skip.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Great job all the way around.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jeff. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, good seeing you too.
Yeah, same here. Good seeing you.
Hi,
Skip.
Darlene.
Thanks. Good seeing everyone. Familiar faces and some new ones.
How's Tom doing, Darlene? Oh, I can't hear you.
Unmute yourself, Darlene.
I think she's unmuted, but maybe her microphone's not working.
I don't see a microphone icon next to her name, so there's
Yeah.
not an active microphone for some reason there. Sorry, Darlene, we can't hear you.
Oh, there she goes. They're connecting.
Yeah.
There you
There
go.
she is. There you go.
I have a crazy thing.
It's
All
echoing.
right, turn off the phone.
I can.
I have a crazy situation here
Uh-oh.
where my computer won't stay on and off. I've got to change my setup here.
Okay.
So I got you on the phone. So the volume is on the phone, but the picture's on the computer. And
Oh.
so that's why I was having the echo. And the phone did something screwy, so I lost. Oh, well. Anyhow, Tom's doing good.
Okay, good.
Yep. And we're getting the garden going, so it's a challenge.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Say hi for us.
Yeah. Hi, Mary. I see you there in the background. How you doing?
Where's Mary? Oh, there's Mary.
There's Mary. She's not unmuted. There you go.
Okay. I see Ken and Diane.
We have
I'm
18.
fine.
We have 18 people signed in so far.
So far. Why
Hi,
are we
Mary. There you go. How you doing, Mary?
I'm doing good.
Good.
This is like
Glad
this.
Things are opening up.
Yeah.
This is
Us
like the
too
secret
here.
I was
club.
finally
here.
able to get away earlier.
Great.
I'm waiting for the Newfoundland one.
Yeah, that's a popular trip. Hopefully keep your fingers crossed 2022.
I'll tell you, I have friends who live just across the border from New York, and they're going crazy because New York, especially upstate, is all open, and they can finally eat outside in
Mhm.
a restaurant for 4 people at once. So it's not that they don't want tourists, they can't do anything either.
Yeah, a lot of the guidelines are still fairly strict, but slowly but surely it's getting better. Although I read a news article online that said that more people have died so far of COVID this year than all of last year combined, which is insane. This is worldwide.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. It's
Well,
well,
because of-
a lot of it's India. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really bad there.
Yeah.
Oh,
So hopefully we'll be able to get this under control this year.
yeah. And the UK is still having a lot of
Also
problems.
Brazil.
Yeah.
Brazil too. Yeah.
South America in general, I think. Yeah.
So, okay, well,
Never
guys,
been
I'm
to
gonna
Rio
sign
de
off.
Janeiro.
Yeah, I'm signing off now. Thanks again,
I am
Jeremy.
too.
Yeah. I'm
Take care,
gonna
everyone.
I'm gonna
Stay
close-
safe.
Bye.
Good seeing you,
close up
Jeff.
shop here.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay, great. Thanks.
care,
Have a good
everyone.
weekend,
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.
Okay.
God bless.
Thanks, Skip.
Take care.
Jeremy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.